So the first thing I did was mix up some thick gel, and this is a combination of clear tar gel and a stiffer medium from Golden. And here it is on the canvas. That previous shot was what the underpainting looked like without the medium on it. And what I'm trying to do here is I'm just trying to put the paint on really quickly and thickly, and without thinking too much or belaboring the process. My main idea with this new acrylic technique is to try to just do away with virtuosity 100% and try to get some of the textures that I've been using in my abstract painting. So it takes quite a bit of discipline to let things go, believe it or not. You just have to kind of relax and let things happen. So I'm mixing the paint on the fly. I'm dipping straight out of the jars of acrylic, and here I am scraping through the medium to try to get back to the original drawing. And the way I do that is I just put some kind of like tracks, you might say. The texture of the trunk is so apparent and so insistent that I can just scrape along there and scratch out the paint that I have over the top. So I'm trying to get some rough edges, and that's helped by the fact if you've got some texture in your underpainting, then you can just hit the tops of those textures and it makes a nice edge. So some of my edges were a little hard, so I'm going to go back here and sort of soften them up. And you can see how I softened that by using the round edge of the palette knife. And I'm using this kind of pie-shaped palette knife, the whole painting on this one. I do use a scraping tool, and there's the canvas scraping tool. And it's a very much like a knife, except it's duller. It wouldn't, cut you or poke through your canvas. But I use that to just scrape and get back little chunks of paint pulled off and get back to my underpainting. So the one thing I have had a little bit of a problem with is getting my darks to be the right value. Acrylic paint does dry a shade darker than it is out of the tubes, so there's a bit of a shift, and you have to kind of anticipate that. So it can make shadows a little bit difficult. With this really textured technique, I haven't had a lot of success with glazing. So if you miss, or scumbling, so if you miss the value, you pretty much have to go back and repaint it. That's been my strategy thus far. So I'm just trying to hit the tops of some of the underpainting texture and slowly build up the texture. Now I do always want to let some of that red shine through, and if I overdo it, I can just go back with my canvas scraping knife and pull that out. Of course, I always like to step back occasionally, and unfortunately, I didn't put enough retarding gel in the initial medium that I'm painting into, and so the paint in the center especially is starting to really get a little bit too dry. So I'm really having to hustle. I can't, sit back and sit in my easy chair and just look at this, because that underpainting, or that layer of paint I'm painting into, is drying fairly rapidly at this point. So the next time I mix this up, I will, add more retarding gel. And it's kind of hard to know how to do it, because right now it's summer and it's quite warm, and it'll be different in the winter. So you don't want to put too much retarding gel. Typically, you don't want to put more than 20% at the maximum. Better 10%. But I'm just gradually going back and filling up all the areas in my drawing and trying to get the texture right. Now, if it doesn't quite work out, I can go back in and restate that underpainting color and then go over the top. So, all is not lost if you miss miss it a little bit. Now some of my textures I really liked, and I wanted to adjust the values by going back in and using some pointillistic dashes and dots. So later in the video here I will be using some markers, and you can see I'm just basically drawing onto the surface. Now there's a white patch up in that tree there, and I'm going to try to soften that by adding some dashes of color. I've got quite a few markers now. I suppose I've got maybe 30 to 40 markers, but it's still not, you can't get every color, so you do have to use field effects. In other words, you have to make the adjacent colors work by adding 2 or 3 different dots and dashes. In the darks it's a little bit more problematic. You can just put some color right over the top, and it's sometimes goes a little bit matte, but there I put down a mark and then kind of smudge it with my finger. But I probably will go over the top with some glazing medium. And here's the final piece.